Boker Tov, everyone.
Boker Tov. Must be Friday.
What is this that makes it valuable?
Now, one of the underlying issues that is rarely addressed, unfortunately, is why the Torah presents all of these stories in Chumash Bereishis regarding our Avot, and then the stories that continue in the Chumash regarding our ancestors in Egypt, and then in the desert, and then in Tanakh. If you're writing a history of your people, and so to speak, you're the party line, why all the negativity? What purpose? The Torah, for instance, could tell us that somehow Yosef became the viceroy in Egypt, and when he became the viceroy in Egypt, he invited his father and family to come to Egypt, and that's how we got to Egypt. That would be essentially the truth. And we don't need the whole story about the brothers. We don't need the whole negativity that is engendered in these parshas in the Torah. And also, we view our founding generations with reverence. The Shiftei Korah, tribes of God, great and holy people. And yet about almost every one of them, the Torah tells us a disparaging story. You want to start, Reuven? The Torah tells us that he did an act that violated his father's privacy and behavior. And Shimon and Levi, they destroy the city of Shechem and kill people who on the surface seem to be innocent victims. They really had nothing to do with the story. They didn't kidnap Dinah. And when they were told that they had to circumcise themselves, they did. So why should they be destroyed? In Yehuda, we read in this week's Parsha the story with Yehuda and Tamar, which is also a strange story, that he has an affair with his own daughter-in-law. Why does the Torah tell us all of this? If the Torah wants us, so to speak, to respect our elders, to have pride of ancestry, to really have the confidence that we are a great nation descended from great people, so then the entire narrative here seems to be not only extraneous, but counterproductive. The Torah is telling us all of the weaknesses that were involved. And again, none of these stories directly pertain to the main story, which is that Yosef somehow brings Yaakov down to Egypt. So in the story, the Torah tells us, because of his relationship to his brothers and how he continually abuses them, so eventually he is recognized by them as being the viceroy in Egypt, and in the reconciliation that brings about, Yaakov comes down to Egypt. But the Torah, as I mentioned earlier, the Torah could have just said that the brothers came down to Egypt and they saw, somehow they recognized that Yosef was the viceroy, and they brought their father, and their story's over. So what lies behind all of this? And then we can trace it back even further. Why does the Torah tell us the story of Yaakov? That he purchases the right of the firstborn from Esav, but he does it under what certainly could be considered a situation of distress and duress. Esav says, Ki oref anochi, I'm going to die. Haliteni min ha'odam ha'odam hazeh, give me something to eat. And Yaakov exploits the moment. And why do we have to know about the rivalry between Leah and Rachel? The difficulties of the family. So in the general world, when histories are written, there are two types of histories generally. One is hagiographic, that everything was great. You read a biography, highlights the greatness of the person. And the other is a type of revisionist history, which is here to break down idols and to say that nobody is great. The Torah seems to want to have both at the same time, to be able to impress us with the greatness of our ancestry, and at the same time to somehow diminish or tarnish the reputations of the people that are involved. So this is a basic question. The question of how we look at Tanakh. So one stream of the Meforshim say that the reason for all of this is to prove to us the truth of Torah. That the Torah was not written, so to speak, by the people who are involved, but the Torah is min hashamayim, is written by a neutral source, by a viewpoint that is above the actual view that the people that were involved could have had. And that therefore, by including all of this negativity, the Torah, so to speak, vouches for its veracity. It supports the fact that it's Torah Temet. Because if it were not that, then it would be a hagiographic. We find, for instance, in the Megillah of Esther, there is always a refrain. You want to know more about Achashverosh? Look in the books of history about the kings of the Medes and the Persians. But if you look in that book, Achashverosh is the smartest, the greatest, the wisest, the most pious, because that's how they wrote about kings, wrote about themselves. And the Megillah gives us an objective view of Achashverosh as being less than wise, corrupt, greedy, a drunkard, quick-tempered. So Achashverosh could not have written the Megillah Esther. The vouching for the accuracy of Megillah Esther is simply the fact that it's obvious that it's written from the outside and not from the inside. So the same thing in Tanakh. All of the records of the kings of Yehuda and Yisrael. So there was a book of records. It says again, every king kept a scribe to record his accomplishments, what happened during his reign, how great he was. But that's not the Tanakh. The Tanakh, almost no one escapes unscathed from the criticism and failings that are recorded therein. So that's one stream. One stream is to look at it and say, this is undoubtedly the true record of what happened, because you see that it is not hagiographic in the instance at all. It doesn't whitewash anybody. It doesn't justify acts which on the surface seem to be wrong and evil. There's a second stream of why the Torah does this. Some of the commentators follow here. The Torah purposely wishes to inform us that we are dealing with human beings and not with supernatural beings. The nature of society, especially when it comes to matters of faith, is to ascribe to its leadership supernatural powers. That's in the ancient world, the Roman emperors had themselves declared as gods, because then they were infallible. They were beyond criticism. So in Judaism, that's not allowed. No human being is a god. No human being is infallible. No human being is perfect. No human being goes through life without, at one time or another, or under one situation or another, being mistaken, committing a sin, not behaving correctly, having doubts. That's the human condition. So the Torah describes itself that way. It says, Sefer Toldos Odom. This is the book of human beings. And all human beings have flaws. And the struggle of all of us is to try and overcome our flaws. In Sadik Bor, it's Asher Yaseh Tov V'lo Yechta. There is no perfect person. Yet, the nature of people is to glorify people to perfection, to greatness. So that even when we witness their flaws, we deny it. Because somehow that weakens our faith, somehow that affects us badly. So therefore we have to ascribe all sorts of other reasons as to why this great person, so to speak, did not in this particular instance live up to his greatness. And that is such a common thing. In today's world, we have it in our politics. But it applies in so many areas. And because of that, therefore, we tend to grant perfection and holiness when it's not necessarily correct to do so, and it's not necessarily helpful to do so. We read in Tehillim, Al tiftachu b'ven odom she'ein lo Yeshua. Don't put your faith in human beings. You will be disappointed. And the Torah wanted to emphasize that lesson to us. So therefore, it took the greatest people that we had, Yaakov Avinu's face is on the throne of God, so to speak. Is he who wrestles with angels. And it tells us things that otherwise would diminish our faith. And it tells us about our ancestors and the tribes. And because of that, therefore, we are saved from having the belief that somehow there are human beings that achieve perfection. Now, there are holy people, no one can deny that. But again, it's not perfection. And there is a great deal of difference. And we see, for instance, in the world, over and over again, figures that arise that are cult figures. That the world follows them, or their society follows them, or their group follows them, and they lead them into disaster. they all drink the Kool-Aid because they believe in a person. And that cannot conform with our understanding of the relationship of heaven and earth and of the Lord and of human beings. And therefore, that is why throughout the Torah and throughout Tanakh, the Torah deals with the negative side, so to speak, just as much, if not more, than it will with the positive side. You know, the greatest example of that is naturally Moshe Rabbeinu himself. And Moshe, who witnesses heaven, so to speak, and brings down the Torah and is L'kom b'Yisrael k'Moshe od, there never was such a person. The Torah tells us, you know, he did something wrong and he's not going there. And that's it. So that's the second stream. That the reason that all of this is told to us is to point out to us that human beings are human and not superhuman. There's a third stream. And that is the stream of humility. The Talmud tells us that out of all of the bad traits that exist, that are possible to exist within people, the worst one perhaps is arrogance. The Gemara says that the Lord says an arrogant person and I cannot be within the same confines, because an arrogant person has no room for anything else. And the arrogance and narcissism go together, right? It's always me. That's one of the terrible challenges of our generation. There's never been such a narcissistic generation. If Moshe Rabbeinu walked in the door today, there would be people that would come up to him and say, "Can I take a selfie with you?"
What's a selfie?
Because it's all about me. It's not about Moshe. And that's accepted behavior in our society. Nothing wrong with it. And the Torah wanted to humble us. A little humility goes a long way. So the Torah gave us instances how we could be humble. Every king of Judah, you could say to him, you know, you're Zeta, you know that story with Tamar? How do you like them apples? And what would be with every king of Israel? Yeah, you come from Yosef, well, you know, I'll tell you this story. All the stories prick the balloon of arrogance. They all concentrate on the fact that a little humility is always in order. And when that humility is lost, so then tragedy occurs. The Talmud tells us regarding Shaul HaMelech. So in the Tanakh it says, Ben Shono Shaul B'Molcho. Shaul was 1 year old when he became the king. So Gemara says that's not true. First of all, you don't make a 1 year old baby the king. And he was not 1 year old. He was a grown man. He had children. And the Tanakh himself describes that he was of great height and enormous physical strength. So the Gemara says it means that he was as clean of sin as is a 1 year old child. He had not sinned. However, we'll understand that. So he is chosen for his humility. He hides amongst the people. The prophet Shmuel has to drag him from the people in order to crown him and make him the king. He has no ambition. But once he becomes the king, his arrogance overcomes him, drives him to paranoia, into depression and melancholy, so that he ends up hating his own family because of the fact that there is no humility left. So the Torah wanted to teach us humility. And I remember, today, in today's world, young men and young women draw up resumes of themselves. And you give the resume to someone that would be a potential person that one would marry, and one would be interested in, etc. Naturally, the resume portrays the person on a good day. Nobody puts in their resume that some days I'm in a bad mood, or that I don't like cauliflower. So I was once speaking with a very, very clever Jew about the issue of, shidduchim and resumes and what. So he says you always have to ask the person, what did you not include in the resume? What about the story that's not there? Because many times that's the story that really identifies who the person is and is the linchpin upon which the relationship will exist. So the Torah wanted us to know that. The Torah wanted us to know that we're looking for humility. If you're looking for humility, then you have to somehow point out the negativity as well, so that a balance regarding the person will exist. So we have here these three ideas as to why the Torah emphasizes, so to speak, the negative part of our ancestry. It wanted to point out human beings, how human beings behave, and wanted to make us humble. And it wanted to show us that even people with faults, so to speak, can be great and can accomplish and can rise to create the Jewish people. So have a Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and a happy Hanukkah. Next Friday, there will be another class. Yes, thank you. And then Saturday night, we have a lecture this Saturday night.